Welcome to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Join the podcast mogul Phil Better as he interviews successful entrepreneurs that make their living in the digital world. Now, let's join your host, Phil Better, and his special guest today on Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Welcome to another insightful episode of Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Phil Better, the podcast mogul. And today we have an extraordinary guest whose expertise in real estate and investing is matched by her passion for helping others achieve financial independence. Our guest today is the founder of Handy Investor PTLT, a fourth generational real estate agent, business owner, investor, and developer with 20 years of experience. She's here to share her wealth of knowledge and the practical strategies developed over her illustrious career. If you're tired of the get-rich-quick schemes and you want the real quick, instead, our guest has simple strategies and easy steps to help you meet your financial goals and invest in income-producing properties. As a wife and mother of 5, she has a unique perspective on integrating high-level business strategies into everyday life and of course, the weekly budget. They have discovered that these strategies can be effectively applied to personal finance in practical and even fun ways involving the whole family. Get ready to be inspired by her journey and the invaluable insight she brings. Please join me in welcoming the incredible Bree to the podcast. Bree, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, good to be here.
So, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to have you on. We're going to just jump into it. Why did you decide to jump into, the entrepreneurial type world and not focus on the 9-to-5 world?
I'm not sure I decided to jump into the entrepreneurial world, but I have ADHD and dyslexia. So coming out of school, I pretty much just thought I was dumb and went into a reception job, which confirmed that because I kept getting the phone numbers back to front and couldn't spell and type and had to go back and liquid paper typed things and stuff like that. So, I learned pretty early on that I wasn't going to fit in the normal 9-to-5. And it wasn't until I was about 26 that I realized I had dyslexia, and I was 36 before I realized I had ADHD. So really, I just kind of always had to make things work or adapt or problem solve or survive. And I watched my mum, who doesn't know she has ADHD and dyslexia as well, run a business but not be able to spell and, cater for 600 people, but not how, so I watched her just problem solve and fix things and get things done. And that's kind of just how I grew up, is that, there's no problem you can't solve. So I'm just a professional problem solver.
I love that.
So so Dad was like, you're mucking around in school, come and be my receptionist. And that was my first taste in real estate. And pretty much did that from in Australia. Year 11 is the second last year of high school. And so I left school early and started doing that. And I really hated it. And doing property management and dealing with everyone's complaints and problems all the time. That was rubbish. And I watched the salesmen, and they were always men. And my dad offered my brothers the salesmen roles. And then at one point they were going to retire, and I said I'd like to buy the business, but I was still quite young and my kids were still quite young. And they said, we wouldn't wish this on your family, so we don't want you to buy it for you. But I still always had that ambition to just do more, be more. And I bought my first house when I was 24, and I already had 3 small kids, and we were on one income. My husband was a factory worker. But the obsession that I felt while searching for a house, I knew every house on the market. I knew more than the real estate agents. They'd take me through a house and they'd be saying things, and I'd be like, yeah, right, the one down the street's like 50 grand cheaper. Like, I wouldn't tell them that, but I just became obsessed with the process of finding a house and finding it for the best price possible. And when I did find that first house, the 2 years before I bought it, the last owners paid $350,000, and I bought it at auction 2 years later for $220,000. And I spent 2 weeks negotiating with the bank. And I remember being at the auction and standing up, leaning against a pole because my legs were shaking, because I was so nervous. And I had my dad, 40 years of real estate standing next to me, just sort of nudging me, telling me what to do and how to do it. So when we bought that property, he brought my grandfather past, and my grandfather went, how the hell did she get that for land value? And so since then, like both of them kind of came to me to find them investment properties. And my husband kept saying, you need to start a business. You need to do this for other people. And I'm like, I don't know how to run a business. So I think I might have been pregnant, and mum and dad needed me to fill in. I think I was a personal trainer at the time. Mum and dad needed me to fill in for someone at the real estate while they went on holidays for 3 months. And so I was back in there, and I watched their sales lady wouldn't turn up very often, wasn't doing a lot. And so as I was leaving after that 3 months, I just said to them, look, I'm not sure if I like doing sales, but if you do have an opening, I'd like to give it a go. Don't hire me just because I'm your daughter. Just, only if you need someone, I'd like to give it a shot, but I really don't care if it doesn't work out. And then a few months later, they called me and said, look, we are looking at putting on somebody else for sales. And yeah, within my first week, I listed my first property. Within a year, I was the top agent in the area. Pretty much my instructions when I became a real estate agent was my dad saying, here's your desk. You're now an area manager. And I said, what does that mean? He goes, you manage the desk area. So your desk is your area that you manage. And everything else I just taught myself through trial and error, through failing forward, through never giving up, becoming obsessed. He took me to a listing in my first week, and he said, now I had done no research. This was a whole other area to the area that I had bought, and it was a few years later. I had done no research on this area. I really still was very green to real estate. And he said, in front of the people we were trying to sell their property and win the listing, we're both going to give you a number of what we think the house will sell for. And then you can see that we're sort of, and I'm giving him the look. I'm like I don't know. I have no idea. I'm just going to pick a random number out of nowhere. Like, don't do this to us, freaking out. And we were like 100 or 150K different in our price differences. And I was honestly just guessing. I had no idea. But he was so confident in what he did and how he did it that he could spin my rubbish answer to make it sound like, we're in this same league, even though we were way out of whack. And he spun it, and we got the listing.
Wow.
So I just, you think on your feet, you roll with the punches, you can make anything sound appealing if you believe it is. So I learned a lot from just watching people do things. Yeah.
I want to touch on the fact that you started a business. You're pregnant, or you have your 3 kids with you. You're facing, the mountain that is dyslexia, and then the course that is ADHD. What was something that kept driving you forward? Like, you're hitting these obstacles, like you're a mother of 3 kids with a husband that's supporting you, but at the same time, you have the role to keep for the kids and juggling that and juggling all these other things. Like, how did you keep going forward?
I think a lot of people might think that I had a husband supporting me, but we were very young when we got married. I was 18 when we had our first child and got married, and it's been 24 years since then, but I was 18 when that started, and I had 3 kids by the time I was 21. And my husband never really had a steady, consistent income. He worked in factories. And every 3 months, he'd be like, oh, I want to go to a new factory, or I want to try a new thing, or I want to start a new business. So he had that same sort of entrepreneur mindset, but it just meant that there was no steady, consistent money I could rely on. And so in the early stages, when I had 3 small kids and I couldn't work with all of that going on, it taught me to be financially savvy. It taught me to stretch a dollar. It taught me to cook, meals under $10, shop for 7 people or whatever under $800 a month. Like, it taught me to be financially conservative, which, watching my mum, she did the same thing. And so I picked up a lot of those things, but it taught me that I had to. And then the drive to not be worried about how much money is coming in this week, I think, was the underlying cause for that, just to not have to rely on anybody else. I think a lot of women are taught to, get married and rely on your husband to provide the income, and that just wasn't the case. And it's not the case for so many women that I see and talk to, that I think deep down, like, first I did it for myself. I became financially independent by building businesses and investing in property. And then deep down, it developed that desire to never watch another woman or even a man who, has the reverse roles, be dependent on an inconsistent income and rely on somebody else and feel helpless to be able to change that circumstance. So a lot of it was, I don't want to live week to week and I don't want that stress hanging over me. What do I need to do to set things up so that money comes in whether I'm working or not? And by the time I had my fourth and fifth baby, my back started to, I kept getting bulging discs, and I had 5 bulging discs by the fifth one, and I could barely walk. I was bedridden. And so in my mind, I knew that I might not be able to physically work for, I don't know when I'll be able to, I don't know how long I'll be able to do this. And so buying these investment properties was the first thought as a child, like as a young thought in my head. I honestly didn't know why people bought investment properties. But the first thought that I had was, my parents are rich and they have investment properties, so I'm going to buy investment properties.
Makes sense. Really simple child logic. Makes sense.
Yeah. Let's keep it really simple. But the second thought I had in my head was the income from these. When I learned what investing was about and why people did it, the income from these will allow me to have that income come in whether I can physically work or not. So yeah, the drive came from a place of desperation, where you hear so many people talking about, it was out of, like, we grew up with, like, not my family, but you hear these other big examples of how they've come out of these slum sort of things. We weren't that bad off, but the pressure of life and money and inconsistency was more than I wanted to manage forever. The stress of that was too much. So that drive came from that. But I also had dreams, like, not conscious dreams that I was working towards. After we bought our first house, we had that small income, 3 small kids, and I was only working part-time here or there, personal training or whatever. And I was literally having dreams that I was looking on realestate.com and I was shopping for houses. And I kept just thinking, oh, we can't afford it. We can't afford it. We can't afford it. And then a friend of ours who's a mortgage broker, I didn't even know, sent a joke email. And I saw that he was a mortgage broker. So I just sent him a quick email and said, look, this is how much equity we have in our house. This is our incomes. Do you think we'd be able to buy an investment property? And I wasn't expecting him to reply with absolutely. And that just started the ball rolling on the next investment property, which we bought through ex-Department of Housing at an auction for $195,000. It was probably worth about $240,000. And today it's worth $850,000, just through time. And it's always had a rental income of over $300 a week. It's always had, like, I've never had to put money towards it. So the reason we could afford to do it on a small income was because it didn't cost us anything. And we used the equity from the first house, which was, they valued it, we bought it $220,000. They valued it after we bought it at $360,000. So we made $140,000 in just buying our first house. So we were able to use that equity as a deposit for the next one. So we never actually had to put cash in to buy these properties, and it never cost us anything to hold. So it's almost like a free way of making money. It just took a bit of time, and every now and again I got a phone call about it, but really it doesn't take me much time at all to look after these properties. And I always have property managers because I hate that side of it. Did I get off track, or did I answer your question? I do that.
It's fun. I enjoy this because every time a guest talks, they're dropping knowledge, and you just shared something about how you can leverage properties to get the next property, which can then help you go to the next stage, and how you did it with putting basically no money down. And auctions are a thing, and people keep forgetting that that's where you can start making it, because most people just go driving around. They don't know about the auctions, they don't know about foreclosures and all this. They look only about buying the first property, like they bought their first house. It's not the same when you're looking for income housing instead of living house.
Yeah, well, the first house we bought was at auction, even though it was going to be our owner occupied house. But that was out of necessity too. We couldn't
Mhm.
afford anything more. Like we couldn't afford a flash, beautiful house. This house that we bought, the first time I walked through it, I went, I'd never live here. And I walked straight back out again. The pool was black because the company who owned it before had a limousine company go under, and they'd done a runner in the middle of the night. That's why the bank was selling it. And so we didn't know if the electricity worked, if the pool worked. There was ducted air conditioning, but we didn't know if it worked, and it was really old. There were half-painted walls and things ripped off, and doors were missing, and all those kinds of things. And it just, it looked like rubbish. But I honestly, after I left that house, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I couldn't stop renovating it in my head. And I couldn't stop, like, there's this obsessive thing about houses and making them better and making them prettier and making money from them that's just addictive. But our third house that we bought through auction, I wasn't even looking to buy a house. I was a real estate agent at that point. And I kept having to drop my kids off to my mum's on a Saturday. And they would always be like, where are you going, mum? Why are you always gone on a Saturday? And I said, do you want me to show you what I do on a Saturday? And they're like, yeah, okay. So the next time I finished a Saturday early, I picked them up and I said, if we see an open home, we'll go to it. It was 3:30 in the afternoon, which is really rare to have an open home at that time in Australia.
Mhm.
And I was so tired. I was driving past and I saw the sign and I went, oh, should I stop? And then I went, no, I can't be bothered. I'm too tired. I went another 30 seconds down that street and something in my stomach pulled me back and I did a U-turn. And I went back and we found the house, and I'd never seen it online or anything. We just randomly saw a sign. We walked through the house and I said, kids, play along, pretend we're interested in buying it. And they're all thinking we're being really sneaky. And we're walking through the house. And I was like, I could live here. I could never afford it. I could really live here. I could never afford it. And then when we get to the front door, the agent said, can you go and ask the kids to sit in the car? I was like, well, I don't do this as a real estate agent. Where are we going with this? He says, I have to disclose there was a murder here. And the first thing that happened in my head was, I can afford it. Nothing else registered, but I can afford it. So within, like, the auction was in a week. So I had no time to get the loans ready, get prepared, get whatever, sell my house so that I could afford it because I didn't know what it was going to cost. I knew it was a big 2-story, 6-bedroom, massive, had formal lounge, formal dining, extra living area of the kitchen, extra living area upstairs. It was massive. It is massive. I've still got it. And I had to throw everything together, and me being the hardball, thinking I bought 2 properties really well, I said to the bank, I'm not going to spend any more than 470,000. So they pre-approved me before the auction for 470,000, and then at auction, as happens, they pushed me up another 20,000. And the bank, now keep in mind, at auction in Australia, if you are successful at the drop of the hammer, it's a 10% deposit, and if you can't complete the loan, you lose it. So I bought it for 490,000, so that was $49,000 cash deposit. And the bank said, we're only going to give you enough for the 470. So I either had to come up with another 20 grand cash, which I didn't have, and or lose the 49,000 that I'd put together. And so after the contract was done and exchanged but not settled, or I'm not sure how your escrow works, but not finished, not keys handed over, I had to go to another bank and apply for another loan and get all of that up. And so it was all up in the air right until settlement, and it was a real rush and a real stress. And almost every single property I've bought has got a story like that, where I've had to jump through hoops, bend over backwards, play with the line of, is this ethical? Not cross it, but play with it, like really make these things work. And honestly, I said I'm a professional problem solver. I'm sure that that's the reason why we've been able to buy these houses. Because if you looked at our income, if you looked at how many kids we had, if you looked at how much the banks hate us, because we don't meet their criteria, we got too many kids, we got too many,
liabilities and that.
Yeah, you would not have been able to make that work. And so, yeah, we bought that house, and we bought that one for 490, and they've just valued it at something like 1.4 million or something like that. Yeah, and it rents for $720 a week, and it doesn't cost us anything to own. So we lived there for 2 years, and we thought that that was going to be our forever home because it was so big and beautiful, but cleaning it was a nightmare, and it's
I
just not
can
working out. Like,
I can
it was,
only imagine.
yeah, it was just too much. So, and I was burnt out. I was working close to 6 days a week, 14 to 16 hours a day, in real estate down here, and I was really in Sydney. I was really burnt out. And I kept saying to the boss, I miss my kids. I was his top agent. He didn't want to lose me, but he wasn't making it any easier for me to stay. And he thought because he bought it off my parents when they retired, he thought that I wouldn't leave because it was my parents' business. But I spoke to him for a long time, letting him know, and he just wouldn't bend. And then I came up to Queensland on a holiday, and I was talking to somebody who was like, my employee's really lazy, and I'm saying I'm working to death. And then as I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Actually, 2 years before, I called this person and I said, I don't know why, but I feel we need to work together. And I really didn't know him very well, but there was just something he said or something that triggered in my mind that made me think of that. And he goes, oh, I don't know how we'd work together, because he was a mortgage broker and I was in real estate. And then, yeah, after this holiday, I called him and I said, I got that feeling that we need to work together again. And I don't really know what you do, but I feel like we can do something together. And he goes, let me put together a job offer for you. And he did. And within 2 weeks, I'd uprooted 5 kids and moved interstate to Queensland. And yeah, I was working for a mortgage broker, and I started selling brand new property off the plan for the developers, and got to know all the land developers and things like that. But what I learned in the 2 years that I worked for him gave me the confidence to start my own business. I learned about how banks work, how they assess loans, how they value properties, how to break down the numbers for somebody and teach them how an investment should be structured and how it should work properly, how you should structure the lending side of it, using equity, and how much equity you can use, and why you're only allowed to use a certain percentage of it, not the full amount, and all those kinds of things that are really interesting. Yeah, so I learned so much about business and got to know so many people up here that I thought, I can't keep selling brand new, because that's not what I have done. And that's not what by this point, I had 5 properties maybe. And it's not how I had made money. And so it felt unauthentic to me to stay selling investment properties that were brand new when I knew I could do a better deal for a client or find them a better investment property if it wasn't brand new. It would make more money. It would, so the ones that I was finding in the brand new section, I did the best I could. I would negotiate the land when most people didn't. I would negotiate the build when most people wouldn't. I would find dual income brand new properties so that the income would be better. And it wasn't just, I don't know if you've ever heard of negatively geared but positive cash flow.
Okay.
So
I've never heard of that, but
yeah, it's kind of a spin, right? It's not legitimately making you money. So back in the day when everybody was all about negative gearing, this probably came into effect. And then when everybody figured out that negative gearing wasn't good for you, they started to do negative gearing with positive cash flow. And do you have depreciation in America?
Yeah, we do have depreciation.
Is it tax deductible?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So with these brand new properties, the build, let's say it was 200,000, a very good percentage of that would be give you a great tax return, anywhere from 2.5 to 5,000 a year back, because it was brand new. But that would only be because it's a sliding scale. It doesn't stay up there. So that would only be for the first year or the first 2 or 3 years, and then it would drop significantly. So this positively cash flowed property would then start to cost you money in 3 to 5 years, because that depreciation, you're not getting that offset in the tax. Keep in mind, it costs you money to hold it all year long, and then you get that money back at the tax time. So it might cost you $5,000 a year to hold that property. But if you got $6,000 back in your tax for it, you were making $20 a week. And that's how they would sell these brand new off the plant properties. And because when I first started, I really didn't know what I was going to do, and I had to learn. It took me a while to figure out that these weren't legitimately successful investment properties or great investment properties. I mean, they've made a lot of money. Like the first ones that we were buying, they were about 475,000, and they're probably worth 800 or something now. But if you think of that $195,000 property I bought that's now worth 850,000, I'd rather spend 195,000 instead of 475,000 to get the same result. Yeah, so it got to the point where my conscience just couldn't allow me to do it, but also they were working $30,000 commissions into the back of the build, and that's how we were getting paid. And these people didn't know that they were borrowing an extra $30,000 on top of their loan for this brand new property to pay us. So once I figured all that out, I just couldn't keep doing it. It didn't. My dad was known as the last honest real estate agent, and I just feel like that's sort of something he taught me, that you don't undercut people, especially the ones that you're meant to be teaching and educating. So yeah, I left that one after a little bit and started my own business where we did I keep it kind of recession proof. So we keep our borrowing under 300,000, even now when the average median house price in most of the state, like the main states in Australia, is $1 million. We're still buying $300,000 properties that are positively geared. Even with interest rates at 7% over here, they're still positively geared. So yeah, no other buyers agents I've talked to do that. They spin it to make it sound good, but they don't actually have those kind of results or those numbers.
And are you now teaching and helping people do the same thing you are doing, or are you just finding these properties and selling them to people?
So about 4 years ago, I've mentioned the ADHD. I had a massive burnout. I call it real estate PTSD. I don't know. Could be having teenagers as well. It could be any of that.
A mixture. We'll call it a mix.
Yeah, we'll call it just a midlife crisis. And so I tapered back a lot on the real estate side of things. I take on clients that come and find me because I've been doing this so long. It's a lot of word of mouth, and a lot of people just come and find me. I have a generic Facebook page and a generic website that I don't really touch or look at very much anymore. We did used to do spending plans for people where I had people subcontract to me, and they would run people through like a program that we built that would teach them how to save enough money or reduce debt or whatever it is they were struggling with. But I've pulled back a lot on that. And about that time, I started a business. Part of the burnout was my youngest son. He's 13 now, but back then he was 9. He has autism and ADHD. And he was really struggling. He was about to get kicked out of an autism school. He was still hitting and biting. He couldn't read. And, I was just burnt out and tired and couldn't really be there for him or be what he needed me to be. And so the second company that I started is we've got 12 OTs, physios or exercise scientists that work for us, and they run kids through an online 16-week Malillo method program. So it helps with brain imbalance. And so that's been my main focus. So I still do find property for people when they come and find me, but it's not really my passion anymore. Property for me has been about reducing debt the last few years, paying principal and interest while interest rates were down at 3%, and just knocking that down. I think we paid off something like 300,000 or more in debt, but that was the properties paying themselves down. So instead of us taking an income from the properties, we just let them go back, let the money go back into them, and reduce the debt on those. But yeah, so we've got something like, I think it's $1.5 million in debt over 6 properties. And their net value is about 3.4 million. So yeah. But banks don't want to lend us money, so that debt reduction is part of that strategy. and we could just sell one and have the debt gone and live off the income of the others. But getting the banks to lend us more money once, it's just that fight. So right now we're just in cruise control. We're not aggressively investing. We're just letting them pay themselves down while we focus on other things for a little bit.
I like that. I like that. And where do you see yourself in 10 years from now? What is Bree doing? Most of the kids are out of the nest. What is
I've
Bree
got 2
doing?
grandbabies, by the way. So yeah, life's never boring here. And most of them are out of the nest. I've only got 3 at home still. So most of them are out of the nest. I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, where I don't know how to go about this just yet, but it's always been something deep down inside of me that I really don't want to. I hear so many women saying, oh, but I could never do that. Or I'm a single mum, I'll never buy a property, or I'll never be able to buy an investment property. Or, you know, just being limited by their own thoughts of why they couldn't do something instead of finding why they could or why they should. So I see myself probably doing some more podcasts. I'm about to start writing a book. Just I really want to empower women to not feel like they can't do anything that they want to do, even if they've got kids or they're, whatever they're going through. I guarantee you, I've been through it. Married 24 years, 5 kids, and all those other things, running businesses and stuff like that. So I really would love to pass that on. Anything I learn, I love to then teach. And I love to keep learning. It's always about learning. So yeah, public speaking. I've always had a vision in the back of my mind, maybe to be on radio or just something where I'm able to get in people's ears. I realized a little while ago that there's, when you think of all the gurus, you've got your, Tony Robbins and it's a Melissa.
Robbins. You have Melissa
Yeah,
Robbins.
like there's so many. But when they get down to the crux of it all, most of them have been divorced or not been married or don't have very many kids, or like they've not had the ADHD or dyslexia or whatever it is. So I'd really love to be a voice for women with ADHD, with kids that have had husbands that maybe their incomes weren't great and they've had to sort of been a single mum but married, like that kind of thing. I'd love to just sort of teach and empower women more, or even men, but women more specifically, because that's what I know, on how to sort of live healthy, have good habits, have good routines. I'm almost militant in my discipline I get up every morning at 5 and I go boxing and kickboxing and things, and sauna and shower and looking after my body and learning about how ADHD brains work and how they dysregulate your stomach and like all those kinds of things, leaky gut, and just anything to do with education, teaching people and empowering them.
I love that. I'm looking forward to your book. Please come back when your book's done, because I would love to have you on to talk about that. Before we leave, because we are getting to the end of the episode, which I hate because I'm having a great time learning all about the tricks and trade of real estate investing from you, Bree, and learning that you're start your new project on helping people live with autism and that through physio training and that. But I want to know, I have your 10-year-old self here. What's one piece of advice you would love to hand back to your 10-year-old self?
That you're enough. I think when you asked where my drive comes from, not knowing that you have dyslexia or ADHD, I'm going to cry. I shouldn't talk to my 10-year-old self. She's very emotional. But when you have those things and you don't know what it is and you don't know why everybody else understands what's going on, but you don't, and that internal, I'm just dumb, I can't keep up, that drive led to nothing you do is enough. Nothing you do is ever good enough. So you've got to work twice as hard as everybody else. She can still work twice as hard as everybody else because I think that's just in my ADHD brain, but she's enough. She's got nothing to prove to anybody else. She can just be who she is, and that's enough. And I would get told that I'm too much. So not always that I would think that I was not enough, then I'd be told I was too much. And so you're not too much, you're enough.
I think some great advice that everybody needs to hear. Thank you so much, Bree, for sharing that with us. And I'm sorry for getting you somewhat emotional near the end of this episode.
It's not hard. It's not hard.
But I'm going to jump off stage here. I want to give you the last little bit. Let my audience know where they can connect with you to see if there's something you could help them with, or to stay in touch for when you drop your book. The floor is yours.
Yeah, look, if you're ever interested in learning more about the Melillo method or online therapy for autism or ADHD, we're Connected Kids with a Z. It's our whole thing is based off of Disconnected Kids, written by Dr. Robert Melillo. And we help kids online. So we've had some clients in America, New Zealand, Australia, all over, even Switzerland, I think, Germany. We got a page translated into German. If you're interested in investing, I'm not sure how I could help you because I'm in Australia and I don't really understand American things too much. But if you're ever curious to learn more about anything like that, I'm always happy to help. I love teaching and educating people. So feel free to look us up at connectedkids.com.au and see if we can help you in any way.
I love it. Bree, I want to thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story and some of those great tips that you had about investing in some real estate and paying off debts. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks so much.
To my audience, make sure you check out the show notes down below to stay connected with Bree and also connected with Disconnecting Kids as well, so you can look there. I thank you so much for listening, and remember always to invest in yourself.